All right, today, starting a new chapter, chapter 4, and what we're going to start off is the first concept in chapter 4 is ratios. Now, ratios are actually pretty easy. Now, the definition of a ratio is comparing two quantities by division. You're probably like, what? What does that mean? Comparing two quantities by division. That sounds like a lot of math jargon, Mr. Meagher. That doesn't sound like anything I'm going to understand. It's going to be hard, and my mind is going to explode all over the place. Okay. No, it's very, very simple. Now, you know that whole math jargon is very confusing, but that's why I'm here. I'm here to clear it up. So what do they mean by comparing two quantities? Well, comparing is looking at how they are alike, how they are different, things like that. And quantities is basically a number of something. So you're looking at a number of one thing and comparing it with a number of something else. And that's a ratio. Now, the whole by division thing, that's going to come a little later. So we're not going to get into that right now in this video because I'm afraid it might confuse you. So we're going to get you the basics down, and then we'll move to that division part a little bit later in a couple videos. Okay? All right. So let's look at this little drawing that I have. As you know, I am an artiste. Very impressed, I know, but this is a math video, not an art video, so maybe I'll make some of those a little bit later. But let's look at this. Now remember, the definition of a ratio, comparing two quantities. Well, in this, I got two quantities of something. I've got circles. There's one quantity of circles. That's something. And triangles. That's another quantity of something. Okay? And we're just going to compare the two. All right. Now, something that's very important when you're dealing with ratios before we learn how to write them is make sure you start with the first thing they're asking for. And we've talked about it many times. Always give them what they're asking for. And I've often told the story of, okay, if your parents ask you what you want for dinner and you say, a video game. What? That's not answering the question. They asked you what you want for dinner. Unless you want to eat a video game, which, I don't know, with sixth graders, that's very possible, then that's not answering the question. So give them what they're asking for first, okay? And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll ask you this. We're looking at this. What is the ratio of circles to triangles? So what are they asking for first? They're asking circles. Okay, so we're going to start with circles. And we need to figure out what the quantity is, because remember the definition of ratio is the quantity of two things. Comparing the quantity of two things. So the first one they're asking for is circles. So how many circles are there? 3. Okay? First part of the ratio. We're not done. Okay? Now most of the time what you'll see with a ratio is something called a colon. So you'll follow it with the colon. Now, there are a couple different ways to write ratios. We're going to stick with this one that's most commonly seen, and then in a later video we'll talk a little bit more about the other ways that you can write a ratio. And one of them you're very familiar with, but we'll get into that later. So we've got our first quantity, but we're not done, because they wanted to know what is the ratio of circles to triangles. Well, we've got our circles, our quantity of circles. Now we need to get our quantity of triangles, which is how many? 2. And that's where I put my 2. There is my ratio, and that's it. 3 to 2. The ratio of circles to triangles is 3 to 2, and that's how you say it. This is like saying 2, okay? So we don't have to write it, okay? And like I said, there's other ways to write it. We'll get into that later. But this basically, the way that you read it is the ratio of circles to triangles, 3, 2, like T-O, the number 2. 3 to 2. That's the ratio. Pretty simple, huh? Very good. Okay, so let's give me one more example, and then we'll move on to another question that they may ask you about on your homework. Okay, so we've got some more quantities up here. And we need to find the ratio of squares to circles. So, once again, we start with our first quantity. Because we asked for, remember, give them what they asked for first. If they ask for what is the ratio of squares to circles, we got to give them what they want first. So the first thing they mentioned were squares. That's very important. So how many squares do we have? What quantity of squares do we have? We have 5. And remember, our colon, which also equals 2, TO. This is our first quantity, so 5, 2. And then our next quantity, which is the second thing they asked for, which were circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've got 6. So the ratio of squares to circles are 5 to 6. There you go. Now, this is why it's important to pay attention to what they're asking for first, because we've got the same shapes here. I haven't changed anything there. But what if they ask for the quantity or the ratio of circles to squares? Then it's totally different. Remember, go with what they ask for first. Since they asked for circles first, we go with the quantity of circles, which we know is 6. And then our colon. And then the second thing they asked for was squares. How many do we have? 5. So then it's 6 to 5. So be careful. Okay? What they ask for first, that's what you give them first. If they ask for the circles first, give them the number, the quantity of the circles, then the quantity of squares. If they ask for the squares first, then you put the number of squares first. Very important, okay? Now, another thing that they may ask, they may give you a little chart. Okay? And in this chart, they may have quantity of something, okay? And it may be a word problem. So, let's say we have flowers and vases, or for if you're really fancy, vases. Very fancy, okay? And they may say in this word problem, what is the ratio of flowers to each vase? But they may not come out and say that. They may say something, well, let's not get into that. Let's just keep it simple, okay? They may say the ratio of flowers to vases, okay? And they may say each vase gets 3 flowers, okay? So it may be in a word problem, okay? Billy Joe is a florist, I don't know, and he's making arrangements, and he's only allowed for each vase to put in 3 flowers, okay? So how many flowers for each vase? Well, they gave us that information. So how many flowers? 3. In each vase? 1. Okay? And they may give you that. So now you know the ratio of flowers to vases is 3 to 1. Now what's the ratio of vases to flowers? 1 to 3. Makes sense? And what they'll do is they'll give you a chart like this. And they may fill it out partially, and you have to put the rest in there. So for example, they may put 6 flowers and leave the vases underneath 6 blank. Or they may leave the flowers blank and, excuse me, wrong one. No, that's right. Put the vases in there, okay? So then we've got to figure out, okay, if the ratio is 3 flowers to 1 vase, it's going to be the same throughout the whole chart. The ratio is going to be the same. The numbers may be a little different. So let's look at, there's 6 flowers. So how many vases are there? Well, if we look back at this, for each vase, you can put 3 flowers. Well, we've got 6 here. So how many 3s are in 6? Or how many times will 3 go into 6? Well, we know, 2 times, right? So if the ratio is 3 to 1, how many vases would be used? Okay, 1 vase would be 3. Another vase would be another 3. How many flowers do you have total? 6. How many vases? 2 vases. There you go. Now, they may give you 3 vases, and you know that the ratio is 3 flowers for each vase. If you've got 3 vases and 3 in each, how many flowers do you have? Well, you take the vases, you know, for every 1 vase, and we've got 3 of them, there's 3 flowers. 3 vases times 3 flowers in each gives us 9 flowers. Look at that. Okay? So hopefully, and like I said, ratios aren't hard. Okay? And this is just examples of what you need to do that. It's a very simple concept. So hopefully that eliminates any confusion, and make sure, and I can't stress this enough, and I've said this multiple times, and you're probably like, I'm tired of hearing it, Mr. Meagher, but give them what they ask for. If they ask for a certain quantity first, give them that first in the ratio. Okay? Otherwise, it's going to be wrong. If you reverse it, it'll be wrong. Okay? All right. Hopefully that clears things up, and we'll talk about ratios again in the next video. See you soon.